All right, so let's dive into something that I think every employer in Texas, especially those without like a big HR department, really needs to get a handle on, and that's employee resignations. It can be kind of tricky.
Yeah, you're not kidding. The at-will employment law we have here in Texas can really make things complicated.
Oh yeah. So for those who maybe aren't as familiar with that,
Hmm.
at will basically means that either the employer or the employee can just end the working relationship like whenever they want,
Mm.
with or without giving notice.
Exactly. And even though 2 weeks notice is, it's considered a courtesy, it's definitely not required by law. And that can be a bit of a surprise for some employers.
Yeah, I can imagine. So that's why I think this deep dive is going to be really helpful for folks. We've got a great article here from the Unit Consulting. They're an HR consulting firm right here in Texas.
Mhm.
And they really lay out how to handle resignations smoothly and, most importantly, legally.
They really do. And their expertise is like super valuable,
Yeah.
especially for those small and mid-sized businesses who, may not have like those big dedicated HR teams that can really help those businesses avoid some of those legal pitfalls that can come up when you're maybe not 100% sure how to handle things.
Okay, so let's get right into it. So picture this. Someone just walked into your office and dropped the I quit bomb. What is the very first thing you should absolutely not do?
Okay, well, I know it can be really tempting to react, emotionally,
Yeah.
especially if it's like a key employee or the timing is just terrible. But like just blurting out something like, you can't quit, you're fired. That was a huge legal no-no.
Yeah, wow. I could definitely see someone saying that in the heat of the moment. So why is that such a bad idea legally?
Well, because that kind of outburst, it can actually change the whole situation from a legal standpoint. It could shift it from a voluntary resignation to a termination. And those two things, they have totally different rules about final paychecks, unemployment benefits, like all sorts of things.
So even if you're thinking it, keep it to yourself.
Got it. Now, what about the Texas Workforce Commission, the TWC? They're the folks who, like, oversee all things employment related in Texas, right?
Yes, definitely. And their website is like a must bookmark for any Texas employer.
Mhm.
They've got really detailed guidance on all sorts of tricky HR situations, including, of course, resignations.
Okay, so let's say we're in that situation. An employee has given their notice, maybe even just walked out. What's one of the most valuable things you can do while you've still got them in the building?
You absolutely need to conduct a well-structured exit interview. I know a lot of companies, they kind of treat exit interviews like a formality, but honestly, that's a huge missed opportunity.
Really? I mean, yeah, you get why they're leaving.
Yeah.
Maybe what they liked or didn't like about the job, that kind of thing, right? Yeah, those are all important for sure. But you can actually get even deeper insights from a good exit interview. Like about your workplace culture, your management practices, even areas where you might need to improve, employee retention. It's like getting free consulting, right? From someone who knows your company inside and out.
Oh, okay. I'm starting to see how valuable that could be.
Yeah.
And this kind of connects back to the U.S. Department of Labor, the DOL, too, right?
Yeah.
They've got all those resources on employee engagement and retention.
Yeah, they do. And what's great is that what you learn from those exit interviews can really give you a more targeted approach to using those DOL resources. So you can actually, improve things for both your current employees and your future employees.
So let's get into some of the nitty-gritty here. So the employee has resigned. Maybe they've even had their exit interview. Now it's time to talk about that final paycheck. What are the things that Texas employers absolutely need to know about this?
Okay, well, Texas has its own set of rules around final paychecks. It's called the Texas Payday Law. And the biggest takeaway here is that final paycheck, it is due on the next regular payday after the employee leaves. So it doesn't even matter if they gave 2 weeks notice or if they walked out that very day.
Okay, so that makes sense. But what about things like, unused vacation time? Does that have to be paid out in Texas?
That's where things can get a little a little bit tricky. Texas law doesn't require employers to pay out that unused vacation time unless it's specifically stated in their company policies or, employment agreements.
So word to the wise for all the employers out there. Make sure your policies are super clear on that stuff. And I'm guessing that's another area where the unit consulting can really help out, right?
Absolutely. They can help you, create policies that are not only legal, but also fair and transparent. So everyone knows exactly where they stand.
So we all know that, employees come and go. It's the nature of business. But how do you make sure that all that valuable knowledge that they gained doesn't just walk out the door with them?
That is a great question. And that's where having a really solid knowledge transfer plan becomes absolutely essential. You've got to think about things like, what are the employees' critical responsibilities? Are there any projects that they're like right in the middle of? Who are their like key contacts both inside and outside the company? You need to document like everything. Think of it like you're creating an instruction manual for the next person who's going to be in that role.
That's a great analogy. So you're basically creating a system to ensure a smooth handover,
Yeah.
even if that departure, wasn't exactly planned.
You got it. And actually, the DOL, they have some really great resources on developing training and development programs that can be really helpful in creating that kind of system.
So we've covered a lot here.
Yeah.
Pretty clear that there are a lot of potential legal landmines when it comes to these employee resignations in Texas.
Oh, there definitely are. The legal landscape here in Texas, it can be pretty complex, especially, when it comes to employment laws. So staying compliant is like key to avoiding those headaches down the road.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I think having experts like the unit consulting on your side
Yeah.
can be so valuable, especially for those businesses that don't have, their own dedicated HR departments.
Absolutely. They can help guide you through like the entire process, making sure you're doing everything by the book.
Now, let's maybe shift gears for a second and talk about something that I think is often overlooked when it comes to these resignations.
It's really easy to get caught up in like the legal stuff and the logistics, all of that, but
Yeah.
we can't forget that there's also like a human element to all of this. Resignations can be, pretty emotional for everyone involved.
That's true. I mean, I've been on both sides of that table, and it's never really easy. The employee who's leaving,
Hmm.
they might be feeling all sorts of things, like excited, anxious, maybe even relieved, all at the same time.
Yeah.
And then their colleagues, they're probably wondering, oh, okay, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for, the team dynamic?
Yeah, you're right. And those emotions, if they're like left unaddressed, they can really, really impact morale and productivity.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So how can employers, navigate this kind of emotional landscape a little more effectively? It feels like it could turn into like a minefield of hurt feelings and misunderstandings pretty quickly.
Well, I think it all starts with empathy. Really listen to the employee who's leaving. Try to understand like their reasons for leaving, acknowledge their contributions to the company, and genuinely thank them for their time.
It's all about just showing them respect,
Yeah.
even as they're, heading out the door. That makes sense. But what about the employees who are staying behind? How do you, as an employer, how do you address like their concerns?
Honesty and transparency are, I think, key. Communicate really openly about like what the transition plan is going to look like, address any rumors or anxieties like head on, and then just reassure them about, the future of the team and the company.
So we've got the departing employee, we've got their colleagues, and of course we've got the manager who's, losing a member of their team. And I imagine that can be tough on the manager too, especially if they had, a close working relationship with that employee.
Absolutely. I mean, the manager might be feeling a sense of loss, maybe even, a bit of failure if the employee is leaving, for reasons that are maybe related to management style or the work environment.
So how do you support the manager through all of this? I mean, they've still got to, keep the team functioning on top of dealing with their own emotions about this.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to acknowledge the manager's feelings and offer support. Maybe that's additional training on like how to manage transitions, or maybe it's just, being a listening ear and offering some reassurance, from higher up management.
This all makes me think back to, those exit interviews that we were talking about earlier. If they're handled, with sensitivity and like a genuine desire to learn, they can really be a great tool for understanding, that emotional landscape of the workplace too.
Absolutely. A well-conducted exit interview can reveal so much about like the overall employee experience
Mhm.
beyond, just the day-to-day tasks of the job. They can highlight things like, where were their communication breakdowns? Did the employee, feel like they weren't getting enough support? Or, did they just have this general feeling of not being valued?
And having that information, being able to see those
Mhm.
patterns,
Hmm.
that's so valuable for creating a more positive and supportive work environment,
Hmm.
for everyone who's still at the company.
Exactly. And it can also help, reduce future resignations, which in the long run, saves time, saves money, and, just avoids a whole lot of headaches for everyone.
Okay, so let's do like a quick recap for our listeners, just to make sure we're all on the same page here.
Okay.
First and foremost, we're in Texas, which means we're dealing with an at-will employment state. So that means either party, the employer or the employee, can end that relationship at any time, with or without notice.
Right. And while 2 weeks notice is, always appreciated, it's not a legal requirement. But, even when you do get that courtesy of the 2 weeks notice,
Yeah.
it's so important to handle that situation professionally, both legally and emotionally.
Yeah, absolutely. Avoid those emotional outbursts that can, land you in some hot water legally.
Yeah.
And always check that Texas Workforce Commission website, the TWC, for, guidance on how to stay compliant with Texas employment laws.
Definitely. And we also talked about, just how incredibly valuable those exit interviews can be. They're not just a formality. They're a goldmine of information that can help you improve your workplace culture, boost retention, and just create a better experience for, everyone at your company.
Right. And then there's the Texas payday law. So that final paycheck, it needs to be issued on the next regular payday after the employee leaves. No exceptions. And be crystal clear about your company's policies.
Yeah.
Regarding things like, unused vacation time. So you can avoid any confusion or, even potential legal disputes down the road.
We also touched on the importance of having that solid knowledge transfer plan.
Right.
To make sure that all that valuable company knowledge doesn't just disappear when that employee walks out the door.
Yeah. Think of it like, you're creating a system to preserve expertise and to minimize disruption, even when there's turnover. And speaking of minimizing disruption, we talk about how crucial it is to really manage like the emotional side of these employee departures. It's all about being empathetic, being communicative, and being supportive towards everyone involved.
Right. You want to create a work environment where, people feel valued even as they're moving on to those new opportunities.
And remember, if you're a Texas business owner and all of this is feeling a little overwhelming, you don't have to go it alone.
Nope, you don't.
The Unit Consulting, they're here to help. They can help you navigate like every aspect of the employee life cycle, including those, sometimes tricky resignations. They can provide like that expert guidance, those tailored solutions, and really just give you that peace of mind, knowing that you're handling things the right way. So it sounds like, the Unit Consulting can really kind of take the guesswork out of this whole thing. But wouldn't it be great if there was like a way to get ahead of some of these issues in the first place?
Well, there is. Remember all that great information that you can get from exit interviews. That's not just for employees who are leaving.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying we could use that to make things better for like the employees who are still with the company.
Exactly. Think of it like, a continuous improvement loop. You gather the feedback, you analyze it, you look for trends, and then you use that knowledge to make your workplace, more attractive to keep your top talent around.
So things like, I don't know, better communication, clearer career paths, maybe just like a more positive and supportive work environment overall.
All of that, absolutely, and more. You can identify and, address those pain points that are driving people to leave in the first place. That's how you boost employee retention and avoid those costly, turnover cycles.
Right, yeah. Because it's not just the cost of, finding a new employee. It's the time it takes to train them and get them up to speed.
Exactly.
So it's really like, instead of just reacting to resignations when they happen, you're being proactive and creating a workplace where people actually want to stick around.
That's exactly it. And, even when you do have resignations, because let's face it, they're always going to happen to some extent, you're in a much better position to handle them smoothly and, professionally.
Okay. I like that approach a lot better. So before we wrap up, I want to kind of circle back to something we touched on earlier. We've talked about, the legal stuff, the emotional side of things. But what about protecting your business? Like all those trade secrets, that confidential information that your employees have access to.
That's a good point. And that's where non-disclosure agreements, those NDAs and non-compete agreements, the NCAs, come into play.
Right.
Those are legal tools that can help you protect, your confidential information and prevent former employees from using it against you.
But I've heard that, those agreements can be kind of tricky to enforce here in Texas.
Well, yeah, there's some truth to that.
Okay.
Texas courts, they really scrutinize those agreements to make sure that they're, reasonable and very specific.
So you can't just, slap together some generic NDA you found online and expect it to hold up in court?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
It needs to be very clear about what information is actually considered confidential and what specific activities are off limits. And those restrictions, they can't be overly broad or unreasonable.
Got it. So if I'm a business owner and I'm thinking about using NDAs or NCAs, what are some of the key things I should keep in mind?
Okay, so first, make sure they're tailored to your specific business. What are your unique needs and like the actual roles of your employees? Second, make sure the language in those agreements is crystal clear. Like there's no room for ambiguity. And finally, it's always a good idea to have an experienced employment attorney, someone who really knows this stuff, review the agreements to make sure they're actually going to be enforceable under Texas law.
Okay, so basically, don't try to do this yourself. Get some expert help.
Exactly.
And that sounds like another great reason to bring in the unit consulting, right?
You got it. They can really guide you through that whole process, from developing the agreements to implementing them and making sure you're protecting your business interests without, accidentally stepping on any legal landmines.
Awesome. Well, hey, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
From, at-will employment and how that works here in Texas, to the importance of exit interviews and knowledge transfer plans, and even how to handle the emotions that come along with employees leaving. It's clear that there's a lot more to employee resignations than meets the eye.
Yeah, there really is.
And it can be a lot for, a small business owner who's already juggling like a million things to try and figure out on their own.
For sure. It's a lot to keep track of.
But that's exactly why resources like the unit consulting exist. They're here to help Texas businesses navigate, these complexities of employment law and create a workplace that attracts and keeps great employees.
Right. They take the guesswork out of it.
Exactly. And remember, they can help you with everything from, creating policies that actually comply with the law to managing those final paychecks, conducting those insightful exit interviews, and, of course, protecting your business interests. So if you're ready to take, like, the stress out of these employee resignations and, build a stronger, more resilient business, give the unit consulting a call at 956-230-6866. They're your trusted HR partner here in Texas.
That's right. They're dedicated to helping your business thrive.
And that's what it's all about, right? Creating a work environment where everyone feels valued and supported, even as they're, moving on to new chapters in their careers. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. We hope you found this deep dive into employee resignations in Texas helpful and, hey, maybe even a little bit enjoyable. Remember, knowledge is power, and having the right information can make all the difference in how you manage your most valuable asset, your people. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of work.